The champagne cork popped like a gunshot. Richard lifted his glass, still wearing his funeral suit, still smelling like the flowers on his wife's grave. "To freedom," he said. His mistress kicked off her black heels, the same heels she had worn to watch his wife be buried just 3 hours ago. "I thought she would never die," Vanessa laughed. They clinked glasses. In the bedroom, where Margaret had taken her last breath, on the sheets where she had suffered for 18 months. But what Richard did not know, his dying wife had been watching, recording, planning, hidden cameras, in every room, capturing every word, every pill he slipped into her medication, every kiss with his mistress while Margaret fought for her life. 237 videos, evidence of murder hidden in plain sight, and Margaret left it all to her best friend, with one simple instruction: if I am wrong, destroy it. If I am right, make sure everyone knows who Richard Thornton really is. And now imagine this: 500 people gathered for Margaret's memorial service. Senators, journalists, everyone who mattered. Richard stands at the podium, crying perfect tears, delivering the eulogy of a lifetime. And then the screens light up, his own face, his own voice, his own words. She takes 2 pills every night. What if she took 4, 5? No one would question it. What happens next will leave you breathless. This is the story of a woman who turned her own murder into the ultimate revenge. Stay until the end. You will not believe how justice finally comes. Message and value: this story carries a powerful truth. Some people hide behind charm, behind tears, behind perfect performances of love. But the truth always finds its way to light. Sometimes it just needs a little help. Margaret could not save her own life, but she saved her children. She exposed a monster, and she proved that even in death, a woman's voice can shake the world. If you have ever felt invisible, if you have ever doubted your own eyes, if you have ever been told you were crazy for seeing what was right in front of you, this story is your reminder. You are not crazy. You know what you saw, and your truth matters. The champagne cork popped like a gunshot in the empty house. To freedom, Richard lifted his glass, the bubbles catching light from the chandelier Maggie had picked out 15 years ago. Vanessa Cole kicked off her black heels. They landed on the Persian rug with 2 soft thuds. She reached for her own glass, still wearing her funeral dress. The silk clung to her body in all the right places. "I thought she would never die," Vanessa said. Richard laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the master bedroom, the same bedroom where his wife had taken her last breath just 72 hours ago. 18 months of pretending to be the devoted husband. He loosened his black tie. 18 months of hospital visits and doctors and her pathetic hope. He took a long sip of the Dom Perignon. It cost $400 a bottle. Maggie had been saving it for their 30th anniversary next spring. She would not be needing it now. Vanessa walked to the dresser. Her fingers trailed along Maggie's jewelry box. Mahogany with mother-of-pearl inlay. A gift from Maggie's grandmother. "When can I move in?" Vanessa asked. "Give it a month for appearances." A month is a long time. Richard set down his glass. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. They both faced the mirror above the dresser. 2 figures in black. Celebrating death. "Patience, baby. We have waited this long. What is another few weeks?" Vanessa smiled at their reflection. "I want to redecorate. This room feels like a shrine. Do whatever you want. It is yours now." Richard reached past her and opened the jewelry box. Inside lay Maggie's wedding ring, a 2-carat diamond surrounded by sapphires. He had proposed with this ring 30 years ago, back when he thought he loved her, back when he did not know any better. He picked up the ring, turned it in the light. "I should probably give this to Charlotte someday," he said. Or you could sell it. That diamond is worth at least 15,000. Richard considered this. Then he dropped the ring back in the box and closed the lid. Later. Right now I want to enjoy this moment. He pulled out his phone, checked it once, locked it, checked it again, locked it, checked it a third time. The nervous habit he had developed years ago, the habit Maggie had noticed, but stopped mentioning. She had stopped mentioning a lot of things toward the end. Are you expecting someone? Vanessa asked. Just making sure no one needs me. The children went back to their hotels. My mother is resting. We have the house to ourselves. Vanessa turned in his arms. Finally, she kissed him. Deep and hungry. The kind of kiss they had been stealing for nearly 3 years. The kind of kiss that no longer needed to be stolen. Maggie was gone. The obstacle had been removed. The future stretched out before them like an open highway. Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking in the corner of the room, hidden behind a decorative vase, recording everything. 3 miles away, Diane Holloway sat in her car outside the Thornton estate. She had watched the funeral from the back row. She had watched Richard's performance of grief, the trembling lip, the single tear that slid down his cheek at exactly the right moment during the eulogy. The way he clutched Charlotte's hand as if he might collapse without her support. Diane knew it was fake. Every gesture, every word Maggie had told her. 2 weeks before she died, they had been sitting in Maggie's hospital room. The afternoon light filtered through thin curtains. Machines beeped a steady rhythm. Maggie's hand felt like paper in Diane's grip. He is waiting for me to go, Di. Maggie's voice was barely above a whisper. I can see it in his eyes. The relief. You are imagining things. Diane had squeezed her friend's hand. The medication is making you paranoid. But Maggie had smiled. That sad, knowing smile that Diane had seen 1,000 times over their 30 years of friendship. I stopped imagining things years ago. That is how I survived. Now Diane sat in her car, engine off, lights off, staring at the big house on the hill where her best friend had lived, and suffered, and died. In her purse was a flash drive. Maggie had given it to her 3 days before she died. The memory came back sharp and clear. Maggie in her hospital bed, weaker than before, but her eyes were sharp, focused, determined. Take this. Maggie pressed the flash drive into Diane's palm. Do not watch it until after. Promise me. After. After what? After I am gone. Bitte? Maggie, you are going to be fine. The doctors said... The doctors are wrong. I know my body. I know what is happening. Maggie closed Diane's fingers around the flash drive. If I am wrong about everything, destroy it. Pretend this conversation never happened. And if you are right... Maggie's eyes had filled with tears, the first tears Diane had seen from her friend in months. If I am right, make sure everyone knows who Richard Thornton really is. Now Diane sat in her car, 3 days after Maggie's death. The flash drive felt like a grenade in her purse, heavy with potential destruction. She started the engine. Her hands trembled on the wheel. She drove home through quiet streets, past houses where families were having dinner, past the elementary school where she and Maggie had met 40 years ago as kindergartners, past the church where Maggie had married Richard in a beautiful June ceremony. Diane had been the maid of honor. She had stood beside her best friend and watched her promise to love Richard Thornton until death parted them. Death had come, but love had left a long time ago. Diane pulled into her driveway, sat in the darkness for a long moment. The only sound was her own breathing. Then she went inside. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat down at her kitchen table, opened her laptop. Her fingers hesitated over the USB port. Once she watched whatever was on this drive, there would be no going back. She understood that on a deep level. Some knowledge cannot be unknown. Some truths change everything. She took a deep breath. She inserted the flash drive. A folder appeared on her screen. Inside were dozens of files, video files, organized by date. The earliest was from 8 months ago. The most recent was from 1 week before Maggie died. Diane clicked on the first video. Maggie's face filled the screen. Pale, tired, dark circles under her eyes, but those eyes were sharp, clear, alive. Diane, if you are watching this, I am dead. Diane's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, and I need you to know how I really died. Diane set down her wine glass. Her hand was shaking. On the screen, Maggie continued speaking. Her voice was calm, measured, as if she were discussing a business proposal rather than her own death. I found the hidden account 3 days ago, $2.4 million, transferred over the past 6 years, to an account in Vanessa Cole's name. Diane paused the video. Her mind raced. Vanessa Cole. She had seen that woman at the funeral, sitting in the third row, too well-dressed, too composed. Richard had introduced her once at a charity event as a colleague from work. Diane pressed play. I confronted Richard. He denied everything, called me paranoid, said the cancer must be affecting my mind. Maggie paused on screen, took a sip of water. Her hand trembled slightly. So I installed cameras in the bedroom, the study, the kitchen. He does not know. The video ended. Diane sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked, ticked, ticked. She clicked on the next file, dated 1 week later. This video showed a different angle. The Thornton kitchen, marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, a window overlooking the garden Maggie had tended for 25 years. Richard stood at the counter, phone pressed to his ear. His back was to the hidden camera. The oncologist says 6 months, maybe less. A pause. He was listening to whoever was on the other end. Finally, he laughed. I know, 18 months of this, but we are almost there. Another pause. And the will? Richard nodded at whatever he heard. Everything goes to me, then to the kids eventually, but I control it all. We just have to wait. Vanessa's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but audible. I hate waiting. Patience, baby. We have waited this long. The video ended. Diane realized she had been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly. Then she stood up, walked to her kitchen, poured herself another glass of wine. She stared at the dark red liquid. Then she poured it down the sink. She needed to be clear-headed for this. She returned to her laptop, clicked on another video, then another, then another. Hours passed. The night deepened around her. Video after video, month after month. Richard and Vanessa in the study, discussing plans. Richard on the phone with his attorney, asking about life insurance policies. Vanessa trying on Maggie's clothes while Maggie was at chemotherapy. The betrayal went deeper than Diane had imagined. It was not just an affair, it was a complete parallel life, a shadow marriage built on lies and patience and the anticipation of Maggie's death. Then she clicked on a video that made her blood run cold. Bedroom footage. Nighttime. The room lit by a single lamp on the nightstand. Richard stood near the bathroom door. He was holding a prescription bottle, not his. Maggie's pain medication. Diane recognized the orange bottle. She had picked up that prescription from Maggie dozens of times. Richard turned the bottle in his hands, reading the label. She takes 2 every night. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. What if she took 4, 5? Vanessa's voice came from off camera. She must have been lying on the bed. Accidents happen. Richard held the bottle up to the light. The pills inside rattled softly. She is so foggy from the chemo. She would not even remember taking extra. No one would question it. Are you sure? The woman is dying anyway. We would just be helping nature along. Diane stopped the video. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. This was not just betrayal. This was murder. She thought about the last months of Maggie's life, the confusion, the disorientation, the days when Maggie could barely remember what year it was. Everyone had blamed the chemotherapy, the cancer spreading to her brain, the heavy pain medications. But what if it was something else? What if someone had been slowly poisoning her, increasing her doses without her knowledge? Diane remembered visiting Maggie 2 weeks after this video was recorded. Her friend had been so confused that day, slurring her words, unable to remember what day it was. The pain pills make everything foggy, Maggie had said. But I only take them at night. Only at night. But she was foggy during the day, too. Diane closed her eyes. The memories flooded back. Every visit, every time Maggie seemed off, every time Richard hovered nearby, watching, waiting, bringing Maggie tea, handing her pills, making sure she took her medicine. My God. Diane opened her eyes, looked at the folder on her screen. There were over 200 videos. She had watched maybe 20. What else had Maggie captured? The next morning, Diane called her brother, Thomas. He was a retired police detective. 25 years on the force before a bad knee forced him into early retirement. I need to ask you something, Diane said. Hypothetically. Hypothetically. Thomas's voice was cautious. He knew his sister. He knew that tone. If someone had video evidence that a person might have been drugging their spouse, slowly, over months, what would happen? Silence on the line, long enough that Diane checked to make sure the call was still connected. That is not hypothetical, is it, Di? No. Maggie? Yes. Thomas exhaled heavily. I was at the funeral. I saw Richard's performance. Something felt wrong. It was wrong. All of it. Diane's voice cracked. She knew, Thomas. She knew what he was doing. She left me evidence. What kind of evidence? Videos. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Hidden cameras throughout the house. Jesus. He talked about increasing her medication, about helping nature along. His words, Thomas. Helping nature along. Another long silence. You need to be very careful, Thomas finally said. Richard Thornton is a powerful man. Wealthy, connected. If you come at him with accusations, you better be absolutely certain. I have him on video. Videos can be questioned. Deepfakes exist. Editing software exists. A good defense attorney will tear apart anything that is not bulletproof. Diane felt her hope deflating. So what do I do? You need more than video. You need the whole picture. Medical records showing irregular medication levels, financial documents showing the hidden accounts, witness testimony from people who noticed changes in Maggie's behavior. You need to build a case so airtight that no lawyer in the world can poke holes in it. That could take months. Then take months. Do it right or do not do it at all. Thomas paused. And Di, watch your back. If Richard Thornton is what you think he is, he will not hesitate to protect himself. 3 weeks passed. Diane transformed her spare bedroom into an investigation headquarters. Photos and documents covered the walls. A timeline stretched across one entire side of the room, marked with dates and events. She had become obsessed. She knew that. She did not care. The flash drive had revealed its secrets slowly. 237 videos in total. Diane watched every single one, some multiple times. She took notes, created transcripts, cross-referenced dates with Maggie's medical appointments. The pattern was undeniable. Every time Richard talked about increasing Maggie's medication on camera, Maggie's condition worsened within days. Every time Vanessa visited the house, while Maggie was at treatment, jewelry went missing. Small things at first, a bracelet, a pair of earrings. then larger items, a diamond necklace worth $40,000. But the most damning evidence was financial. Diane had connections, a friend who worked at a bank, a former colleague who specialized in forensic accounting. She called in every favor she had accumulated over 40 years. The picture that emerged was staggering. Richard Thornton had systematically drained his wife's inheritance over 15 years. The money from Maggie's father, the trust fund from her grandmother, the investment portfolio her mother had left her. All of it funneled into hidden accounts, shell corporations, offshore investments, and in the past 3 years, a steady stream of transfers to Vanessa Cole, $2.4 million. The number kept echoing in Diane's mind. $2.4 million paid to the woman sleeping with Maggie's husband while Maggie was dying. While Maggie was being slowly poisoned in her own home, Diane added another document to her wall. Life insurance policies. She had obtained copies through her brother's connections, 4 policies. Taken out over the past 3 years, each one larger than the last. Total value, $7 million. The final policy was purchased 6 weeks before Maggie died. Richard had been planning this for years. Every detail calculated, every contingency covered. He had turned murder into a business plan. Diane sat down heavily in her desk chair. The weight of what she had discovered pressed down on her chest. Maggie, her best friend since kindergarten, the woman who had been her maid of honor at her wedding to Frank. The woman who had held her when Frank died of a heart attack 8 years ago. The woman who had been there for every triumph and tragedy of Diane's life. That woman had been betrayed in the worst possible way. By the man who had promised to love her. In the home where she should have been safe. Diane's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it, read the words. Her heart stopped. Mrs. Holloway, I think we need to talk about my mother, Charlotte Thornton. They met at a cafe outside town. Neutral territory. A place where neither of them would be recognized. Charlotte Thornton looked like her mother, the same dark hair, the same sharp eyes, but where Maggie's eyes had been warm, Charlotte's were guarded, suspicious. Thank you for meeting me, Charlotte said. How did you get my number? Mom's phone. I was going through her contacts. You were listed as emergency only. Charlotte's voice cracked slightly. I figured that meant you were important to her. Diane felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Your mother was my best friend for 40 years. I know. She talked about you all the time. Charlotte wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. Not drinking, just holding it for warmth. Toward the end, she talked about you even more. What do you mean? She said things, strange things, about the truth coming to light, about making sure I knew what really happened. Charlotte pulled out her phone, scrolled to a text message. She sent me this 2 days before she died. Diane read the words on the screen. My sweet girl, remember what I told you. The truth always finds its way to light. I love you forever. Mom. I thought it was the morphine talking, Charlotte said. Now I am not so sure. Diane studied the young woman across from her, saw the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the barely contained grief and anger. What made you change your mind? My father. Charlotte's voice hardened. Did you see him at the funeral? I was in the back. He cried during the eulogy, one single tear, perfectly timed. Charlotte shook her head. And then we got back to the house, and he started talking about the estate, the will, the life insurance. Mom was not even cold yet. Diane reached into her purse. Her fingers touched the flash drive. She hesitated. Charlotte, I need to ask you something important. Are you ready to learn things about your father that you can never unlearn? Charlotte's jaw tightened. My mother died afraid, confused, in pain. If someone caused that, I need to know. Diane set the flash drive on the table between them. Your mother left me this. There are over 200 videos, hidden cameras, throughout your house. Charlotte stared at the small device. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Not yet. Diane covered Charlotte's hand with her own. Not until you are ready to accept what you will find. There is no going back from this. Charlotte looked up. Her mother's eyes stared back at Diane, filled with determination. I spent my whole life believing my father was a good man. I watched him hold my mother's hand in the hospital. I watched him cry at her bedside. I watched him fall apart at her funeral. She pulled her hand away, picked up the flash drive. If all of that was a lie, then I have been living in a lie, and I would rather know the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Charlotte watched the videos in Diane's spare bedroom, the investigation room. She stood surrounded by documents and photos and evidence of her father's betrayal. Diane sat in the corner, silent, watching Charlotte's face as revelation after revelation played across the screen. Charlotte did not cry, not at first. She watched her father discuss her mother's death with his mistress. She watched him calculate life insurance payouts. She watched him hold up her mother's pain medication and wonder aloud what would happen if she took too many pills. Through it all, Charlotte remained still, frozen, like a woman watching a car accident in slow motion. When the video ended, she finally spoke. I remember this day. Her voice was flat, emotionless. Mom was so confused that afternoon. She could not remember my name. Diane nodded. That was 2 days after this video was recorded. He was drugging her. It was not a question. We believe so. How long? Based on the videos and medical records, we have been able to obtain at least 6 months, maybe longer. Charlotte turned to face Diane. Her eyes were dry, but burning with something fierce. My mother trusted him. She spent 30 years with that man. She raised his children. She built his home. She gave up her career so he could advance his. Diane said nothing. There was nothing to say. And he killed her. Charlotte's voice cracked on the last word. He murdered her slowly while pretending to love her. Now the tears came, silent streams down her face. Diane crossed the room and wrapped her arms around Maggie's daughter. They stood there together, 2 women united by love for someone they had lost, 2 women facing an enemy they were just beginning to understand. Benjamin Thornton poured his 4th scotch of the afternoon. His father sat across from him in the study. Richard's study now, not his parents' study. The room smelled like cigars and old money. Your mother would want you to be strong, son. Richard swirled his own drink. She would want us to move forward. It has been 3 weeks, Dad. Grief does not operate on a timeline, but life does. Richard leaned forward. The business needs attention. The estate needs managing. There are decisions that cannot wait. Benjamin nodded slowly. He wanted to believe his father, needed to believe him. The alternative was too terrible to contemplate. But something had been nagging at him since the funeral. Small things, the way his father's tears seemed to switch on and off like a faucet, the way Vanessa Cole kept appearing at family dinners over the past year, the way his mother had pulled him aside at Christmas and said strange things about making sure he knew she loved him. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Who is Vanessa Cole? Richard's expression did not change, not a flicker. A colleague. She has been helping me with a project at work. Why do you ask? She was at the funeral, in the 3rd row. Many colleagues attended the funeral. Your mother was well liked. She was at Christmas dinner too, and Thanksgiving. She did not have family in town. Your mother invited her. Benjamin studied his father's face. Calm, composed, sincere. Maybe he was imagining things. Grief did strange things to a person's mind. His mother's death had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. I am sorry. Benjamin shook his head. I do not know why I am asking these things. Because you are grieving. We all are. Richard stood and crossed to his son, placed a hand on his shoulder. But we will get through this together, as a family. That is what your mother would have wanted. Benjamin nodded, let himself be comforted. But later, alone in his childhood bedroom, he could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. His mother's last text message haunted him. The truth always finds its way to light. Why would she write that? What truth? Charlotte called Benjamin at midnight. Did you notice anything strange at the funeral? Like what? Benjamin's voice was groggy, half asleep. Like Dad barely crying, like that Vanessa woman standing too close to him at the reception. Charlie, you are grieving. We all are. Ben, Mom sent me a text about the truth coming to light, 2 days before she died. Do you not think that is strange? Silence on the line. I think you need sleep. Benjamin's voice had hardened. We all do. He hung up. Charlotte stared at her phone. Alone in this. Or maybe not. She pulled up Diane Holloway's number, typed a message. He does not believe me, but I am not giving up. The response came immediately. Neither am I. We have work to do. 3 more weeks passed. Spring crept into the city. Trees budded. Flowers bloomed. Life continued despite death. Diane and Charlotte worked in secret, building their case piece by piece, gathering evidence like archaeologists unearthing bones. The financial picture grew clearer with each passing day, and darker. They discovered that Richard had taken out the first life insurance policy just 2 months after Maggie's cancer diagnosis. He had increased her coverage 3 more times as her condition worsened. The final policy was purchased when her doctors gave her 6 months to live, $7 million in death benefits, all payable to Richard Thornton. But that was not the worst of it. Stephen Blackwell, the family's estate attorney, agreed to meet with them on a Tuesday afternoon. He looked nervous, kept glancing at the door of his office. Mrs. Thornton came to see me 3 months ago. His voice was barely above a whisper. Without her husband. Diane leaned forward. What did she want? To change her will. Remove Richard entirely. Leave everything to the children, with a trustee appointed from outside the family. Charlotte's hand gripped the armrest of her chair. And did she? Blackwell's face crumbled. Years of professional composure dissolved in an instant. The new will was drafted, but she died before she could sign it. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Richard found out about the new will 1 week before she died. Blackwell's voice cracked. He came to my office, threatened me, said if I told anyone he would destroy me. He knew. Charlotte's voice was ice. He knew she was trying to protect us from him. Blackwell nodded miserably. I wanted to warn her. I tried to call, but Richard answered her phone, said she was too weak for visitors or calls. Diane felt sick. The timeline was becoming horrifyingly clear. Maggie tried to change her will. Richard found out. 1 week later, Maggie was dead. Not from cancer, not from the natural progression of her illness. From a husband who could not let her escape. That night, Diane received a warning. She came home from the grocery store to find her car vandalized. All 4 tires slashed. Diagonal cuts that could not be mistaken for anything accidental. A note was tucked under her windshield wiper. Block letters on plain white paper. Grief makes people do crazy things. Be careful. Diane's hand shook as she read the words. She looked around the parking lot, empty, silent. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pavement. She called Charlotte immediately. He knows. Richard knows. How? I do not know, but we need to move faster. That night, Diane installed security cameras around her apartment, checked every lock twice, slept with her phone in her hand. But sleep did not come. Every creak of the old building made her jump. Every car passing on the street below made her heart race. She was afraid. She admitted that to herself in the dark hours before dawn. Richard Thornton was powerful, wealthy, connected. He had killed one woman already, maybe two, if Eleanor's suspicions about Sarah were true. Diane was just a retired teacher, a widow with a small pension and a two-bedroom apartment, but she had something Richard did not have. She had the truth, and she had a promise to keep. The next morning, Diane drove to the cemetery. Maggie's grave was on a small hill overlooking a pond. The headstone had finally been installed. White marble with gray veins, simple and elegant, like Maggie herself. Margaret Ann Thornton, beloved mother and friend, 1972 to 2025. The truth always finds its way to light. Diane had insisted on that final line. Richard had objected. Charlotte had overruled him. Now Diane sat on the damp grass beside her friend's grave. The morning air was cold. Her breath came out in small white clouds. She did not speak at first, just sat, remembering. A memory surfaced, sharp and bright. Maggie at 25, dancing at her wedding reception, her white dress swirling around her, her face flushed with joy. "I found the good one, Di." Maggie had grabbed Diane's hands and twirled her around. "I really did." Diane wiped tears from her cheeks. "You deserved so much better," she whispered to the gravestone. "You deserved someone who loved you as much as you loved them." She pulled out her phone, took a photo of the grave, sent it to Charlotte with 3 words. For her, always. Then she stood up, brushed the grass from her coat. There was work to do, and she would not rest until it was done. Richard Thornton stood at the window of his corner office, 47 floors above the city streets. The view had cost him 20 years of calculated ambition. He was not about to let some grieving spinster take it away. His private phone buzzed. Gerald Frost, the attorney who handled delicate situations. "The Holloway woman has been making inquiries." Richard's jaw tightened. "What kind of inquiries?" "Financial. Medical. She has been to the hospital twice asking about your wife's medications. She has been in contact with Stephen Blackwell." Blackwell. Richard's voice was flat, dangerous. "I told him what would happen if he talked." It appears he talked anyway. Richard turned from the window. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Cold eyes, hard mouth, the face of a man who had built an empire on the backs of others and would burn it all down before letting anyone take it from him. Handle it. The woman? Whatever is necessary, within limits. I do not want another body. Just make sure she understands the cost of continuing. And Blackwell? He has a gambling problem, outstanding debts to people who do not accept payment plans. Richard straightened his tie. Remind him of that. That same night, Diane almost gave up. She sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by papers, files, evidence that might not matter. Richard had money, power, connections. What did she have? Videos that a good lawyer could claim were fabricated. Financial records that could be explained away. A grieving daughter whose testimony would be dismissed as emotional. The slashed tires, the threatening note, the feeling of being watched every time she left her apartment. She was 63 years old, alone, fighting a battle she was not sure she could win. "Maggie." She spoke to the empty room. Her voice cracked. "I do not know if I can do this." The silence pressed down on her, heavy, suffocating. She thought about calling Charlotte, telling her it was over, that they had done their best, but it was not enough. Then she remembered Maggie's last words to her, in the hospital. Hand in hers, skin paper thin, eyes blazing with determination. "Do not let him win. Do not let him erase me." Diane closed her eyes, let the words wash over her. "I am not crazy. I know what I saw in those bank statements. I know what I heard through the bedroom door. Maggie's voice, from one of the early videos. The first time she had spoken her truth aloud to no one but a camera lens. I deserved better than this. Another video. Maggie sitting in her closet, hidden from the world, speaking the words she could never say to anyone else. Starting over feels impossible, but staying feels worse. Diane opened her eyes, reached for her phone. A text from an unknown number. I have information about Richard Thornton. Meet me tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Tell no one. The text was from Eleanor Thornton, Richard's own mother. They met at Eleanor's apartment, a quiet place on the Upper East Side, filled with antiques and old photographs, the smell of lavender and time. Eleanor was 78 years old, silver hair, ramrod posture, eyes that had seen too much and kept too many secrets. I have watched my son become a monster. Her voice was steady, despite her age, and I did nothing. Diane sat across from her in a velvet armchair, waiting. Richard was always charming, too charming. Even as a boy, he knew how to make people see what he wanted them to see. Eleanor stood slowly, crossed to an antique writing desk, opened a drawer and retrieved a folder, yellowed papers inside. His first wife, before Maggie. She set the folder on the coffee table between them. Did you know about Sarah? Diane shook her head. They were married for 2 years. She died in a car accident. Richard was the only witness. Eleanor's hand trembled as she opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, a police report, letters written in a woman's handwriting. Sarah Thornton, 26 years old when she died. Wealthy family, large inheritance. Diane felt the blood drain from her face. You think Richard... The police ruled it an accident. Car went off a cliff on a mountain road. Richard claimed the brakes failed. Eleanor pulled out a receipt. Old and faded, but still legible. I found this 2 weeks after her death. Hidden in Richard's desk. A mechanic's receipt for brake work on Richard's car. My God. I confronted him once. Eleanor's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He looked at me with those cold eyes and said, Mother, do not ask questions you do not want answered. The old woman sat back in her chair, 60 years of guilt etched into her face. I knew then. I knew what my son was capable of, and I was too afraid to do anything. Why are you telling me now? Eleanor met Diane's eyes. Because Maggie deserved better. Because those children deserve to know the truth. And because I am 78 years old, I will not go to my grave with this secret. They met at Diane's apartment that evening. All of them, Charlotte, Benjamin, Eleanor, Diane, 4 people united by a single purpose. Benjamin had finally come around. The previous week, he had gone through his father's home computer, looking for answers, hoping to prove Charlotte wrong. Instead, he found emails, text messages, a paper trail of deception spanning years. Now he sat on Diane's couch, his face pale, his hands clenched. I defended him. His voice was hollow. I told Charlotte she was imagining things. I told her grief was making her paranoid. You could not have known. Charlotte sat beside her brother, her hand on his arm. I should have known. The signs were there. I just refused to see them. Eleanor spoke from her chair by the window. That is what Richard does. He makes you doubt your own eyes, your own judgment. It is a kind of magic trick. Look over here while I do terrible things over there. Diane spread the evidence across her coffee table. Videos, financial records, Sarah's file, Blackwell's testimony. This is everything we have. It is damning, but we need Richard to incriminate himself publicly. We need to remove any doubt. Charlotte leaned forward. The memorial service is next week. 500 people will be there, including the press. The memorial service? It was my father's idea, a public celebration of my mother's life, all their friends, his business associates, local politicians. Diane understood immediately. His grand performance. He is giving the eulogy, playing the grieving widower for maximum sympathy. A slow smile spread across Diane's face, the first real smile she had felt in months. Then that is when the truth comes out. The planning took 6 days. 6 days of secret meetings, encrypted messages, careful coordination. They needed more than video evidence. They needed a confession, something so public and so undeniable that no lawyer could spin it away. Charlotte came up with the key. "Vanessa," she said, during one of their late-night sessions, "she is the weak link. My father is a sociopath. He will never confess. But Vanessa is just greedy and scared. How do we get to her? I confront her, alone, tell her we have evidence. Give her a chance to save herself by turning on him." Benjamin shook his head. "Too dangerous. Dad has people watching all of us. Then we choose the location carefully. Somewhere public, somewhere she cannot run." Eleanor spoke up. "The parking garage of her apartment building, security cameras everywhere but the stairwell. You go in through the stairs. Catch her when she is walking to her car." Charlotte nodded. "And I record everything on my phone." Diane felt a chill run down her spine. Maggie's daughter had inherited more than her mother's eyes. She had inherited her steel. 3 days before the memorial service. Charlotte waited in the stairwell of Vanessa Cole's apartment building. Her phone was already recording, hidden in her coat pocket, but angled to capture her face and voice. Footsteps echoed in the concrete cavern, heels clicking, getting closer. Vanessa appeared at the entrance to the parking level. Designer handbag, tailored coat, the picture of success built on stolen money and broken lives. Charlotte stepped out of the shadows. "Miss Cole, we need to talk." Vanessa's face went pale. "I do not know you." "Yes, you do. I am Charlotte Thornton, Margaret's daughter." Vanessa's hand went to her purse, looking for her phone, looking for an escape. "I would not run if I were you. I have footage, video footage, of you and my father discussing my mother's death, planning it." Vanessa froze, her mask of composure cracking like ice under pressure. "I do not know what you are talking about." My mother installed hidden cameras throughout the house. She recorded everything, every conversation, every plan, every time you tried on her jewelry while she was at chemotherapy. The color drained from Vanessa's face completely. Her hands began to shake. "He told me she was already dying." The words tumbled out, desperate, defensive. "He said we were just helping nature along." Helping nature? The pills? He said the pills would just ease her passing. That she wanted to go, that she was suffering. Charlotte kept her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding, even though rage was building in her chest like a wildfire. "So you knew about the pills. I did not." Vanessa stopped, realized she had already said too much. "I want a lawyer." "You will need one." Charlotte turned and walked away, her phone still recording, every word captured. The night before the memorial service, Diane visited Maggie's grave one final time. The sun was setting, golden light spilled across the cemetery. The white headstone seemed to glow. Tomorrow they will know. Diane knelt beside the grave, her voice soft. "Everyone will know who you really were and who he really is." She placed a single white rose on the earth. "Rest now, my friend. We have got this." She stayed until the sun disappeared below the horizon, until the stars began to appear one by one. Then she walked to her car, ready for what came next. Her phone rang. Thomas, her brother. "Detective Webb just called. They found something else. Something Richard does not know we have." "What is it?" Sarah Thornton's autopsy report. The original one, before it was altered. Diane's breath caught. Altered? The brake failure theory never made sense. The medical examiner found injuries inconsistent with a car accident. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head, the kind you get when someone hits you with a heavy object. She was murdered, and Richard Thornton was the only person with her when she died. Diane closed her eyes. 2 women, 30 years apart, both dead because they loved a monster. Tomorrow, that monster would finally be exposed. 500 people filled the cathedral. White flowers covered every surface. Lilies, roses, hydrangeas. The scent was almost overwhelming, sweet and heavy and funereal. A massive portrait of Margaret Thornton hung above the altar, her smile warm and genuine, her eyes full of the kindness that had defined her life. Richard Thornton stood at the front of the church, shaking hands, accepting condolences, the picture of dignified grief, his silver hair perfectly styled, his black suit impeccably tailored. Vanessa Cole sat in the 5th row, trying to look appropriately sad, failing spectacularly. Diane entered through a side door. She wore black, simple and understated. Maggie would have approved. She took her seat near the back. Charlotte and Benjamin were already in the front row. Eleanor sat beside them. 3 generations united against one man. Detective Marcus Webb stood near the exit, plain clothes, unobtrusive, ready. The organ music faded. Pastor William Garrett stepped to the podium. We gather today to celebrate the life of Margaret Ann Thornton, beloved wife, devoted mother, cherished friend. The familiar words washed over the crowd, but Diane was not listening. She was watching Richard, studying his performance. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. His shoulders trembled with suppressed sobs. A woman in the 3rd row reached out to pat his arm sympathetically. Perfect, Diane thought. Absolutely perfect. Then Richard approached the podium to deliver his eulogy. Margaret was my everything. Richard's voice trembled with emotion. His hands gripped the edges of the podium. My partner, my best friend, the mother of my children. He paused, looked out at the crowd. 500 faces filled with sympathy for the grieving widower. 30 years we spent together, 30 years of laughter and love and building a life. I cannot imagine my world without her. His voice cracked. A single tear traced down his cheek. I held her hand as she took her last breath. He looked toward the ceiling, as if he could see Maggie watching from heaven. I told her I would love her forever. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the congregation. That was when Diane stood. I held her hand too. Her voice rang clear through the cathedral. 500 heads turned toward her, and she told me something very different. Richard's face flickered. Just for a moment. The mask slipped. A flash of something cold and dangerous beneath the grieving widower. This is not appropriate. His voice was sharp now. Security? She told me about the pills you were giving her. Diane stepped into the center aisle. The extra doses. She told me about the hidden accounts, the $7 million in life insurance. The murmuring grew louder, confused, shocked. Charlotte stood. She told me too, Dad, and she left evidence. The enormous screens on either side of the altar flickered to life. Charlotte had arranged for the technical setup, told the church it was for a video tribute. Now Richard's face filled those screens, his own living room, his own voice. She takes 2 every night. What if she took 4, 5? Vanessa's voice through the speakers. Accidents happen. Gasps filled the cathedral. Someone screamed. A woman in the front row fainted. Richard's face went white. This is fake. This is doctored. The video continued. Richard holding the prescription bottle, turning it in his hands. She is so foggy from the chemo, she would not even remember taking extra. No one would question it. Detective Webb stepped forward. Two uniformed officers appeared behind him. Richard Thornton. Webb's voice cut through the chaos. You are under arrest for the murder of Margaret Thornton. The arrest happened in front of 500 witnesses. Richard struggled against the handcuffs, his composure completely shattered. This is a setup. This is not real. Those videos are fabricated. You have the right to remain silent. Webb recited the words with grim satisfaction. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Vanessa Cole tried to slip out a side door. Two officers blocked her path. Miss Cole? A female detective stepped forward. You are also under arrest. Conspiracy to commit murder. Vanessa's scream echoed through the cathedral. I did not do anything. It was all Richard. He planned everything. We have your recorded confession. Charlotte stepped forward, her phone in her hand. Every word. The crowd was on its feet now, chaos and shock and horrified realization spreading like wildfire. Richard was dragged down the center aisle, past the white flowers, past the portrait of the woman he had murdered, past the people who had believed his lies for 30 years. His eyes found Diane in the crowd, burning with hatred. You will regret this. His voice was a snarl. I will destroy you. You destroyed yourself, Richard. Diane's voice was calm, steady. Maggie just made sure everyone would see it. The doors of the cathedral swung open. Sunlight flooded in. Cameras flashed. Richard Thornton was led into the light, his crimes exposed, his empire crumbling. And somewhere, Diane believed, Maggie was finally at peace. The cathedral slowly emptied. 500 people filed out in stunned silence. Some were crying, some were on their phones, already calling lawyers and family members and reporters. Charlotte stood at the altar, beside her mother's portrait. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I need to say something. The remaining crowd stopped, turned back, listening. My mother was the kindest, strongest woman I have ever known. Charlotte's voice echoed through the empty spaces. She spent her last months gathering evidence to protect us from the man who was supposed to love her. Benjamin joined his sister. He took her hand. She knew she was dying. Charlotte continued, and she used that time to ensure justice would come, not for herself. She knew she would not live to see it. But for us, for everyone who loved her, for every woman who has ever been betrayed by someone who promised to protect her. Eleanor rose from her seat, made her way slowly to the altar, tears streaming down her face. My mother did not die a victim. Charlotte's voice broke, but she pushed through. She died a warrior, and today we honor her the way she deserved. She looked at the portrait above her, her mother's smile, her mother's eyes. The real memorial starts now. Let me tell you about the woman Margaret Thornton really was. 6 months later, the trial was the biggest news story of the year. Richard Thornton was convicted of first-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Videos, financial records, testimony from Stephen Blackwell, who had finally found his courage. Testimony from Eleanor, who had finally unburdened herself of secrets she had carried for 30 years. The investigation into Sarah Thornton's death was reopened. New evidence emerged. The altered autopsy report, the mechanic's receipt, witnesses who had been afraid to speak for 3 decades. Richard faced 2 life sentences. He would die in prison. Vanessa Cole pleaded guilty to conspiracy. She testified against Richard in exchange for a reduced sentence, 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. Stephen Blackwell faced disbarment but cooperated fully with the investigation. His testimony was crucial in establishing the timeline of events. The financial assets were recovered. Every hidden account, every offshore investment, Every dollar that Richard had stolen from his wife, Maggie's estate was distributed according to her wishes. The will she had drafted, but never signed, was honored by the court. Charlotte and Benjamin inherited everything, with a trustee appointed from outside the family. And a foundation was established in Maggie's name, the Margaret Thornton Foundation, supporting women escaping abusive relationships, providing legal assistance, financial resources, safe housing. The foundation's first major donation came from Eleanor Thornton. Her entire estate, $3 million. Penance, she said simply, for 30 years of silence. On a spring afternoon, 1 year after Maggie's death, the foundation held its opening ceremony. A small crowd gathered in the garden of a restored Victorian house, the foundation's new headquarters, once a private residence, now a place of refuge and hope. Charlotte stood at the podium. Behind her, a portrait of her mother hung on the wall. The same portrait from the funeral, the same warm smile, the same kind eyes. "I want to read something my mother wrote." Charlotte unfolded a piece of paper. Her hands no longer trembled. "We found this in her journal, dated 2 weeks before she died." The crowd fell silent. If you are reading this, then the truth has come to light. Not because I am brave, not because I am strong, but because I finally stopped being afraid of what I already knew. Charlotte paused. Let the words settle. "I spent 30 years living with a lie, telling myself that if I just loved him enough, he would become the man I needed him to be. That is not love. That is fear wearing a mask." In the audience, women nodded. Recognition in their eyes, validation in their tears. Real love does not require you to shrink. Real love does not punish you for having thoughts and feelings and dreams of your own. Real love lifts you up. It does not tear you down. Charlotte looked up from the page. "My mother wrote those words while she was dying, while she was being murdered by the man who should have protected her, and still she found the strength to speak the truth." She folded the paper, placed it over her heart. The truth always finds its way to light. Sometimes it just needs a little help. The reception was held in the garden. White roses bloomed along the pathways, Maggie's favorite flower. Charlotte had made sure they were planted everywhere. Diane stood near the back, watching, a glass of champagne in her hand. A year ago, she had been a grieving woman with a flash drive full of secrets. Now she was on the board of directors of a foundation that would help thousands of women find their way out of darkness. Maggie would have been proud. Diane was certain of that. Benjamin approached her. He had grown up so much in the past year. The boy who had defended his father was gone. In his place stood a man who understood that sometimes the people you love are not who you think they are. "Thank you." He stood beside her, looking out at the crowd. "For not giving up. For keeping your promise to her." "I loved her." Diane's voice was soft. "That made it easy. She loved you too. You were the sister she never had." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Charlotte shake hands and accept hugs, watching Eleanor sit in a wheelchair near the roses, finally at peace. "What will you do now?" Benjamin asked. Diane smiled. "Live. That is what Maggie would have wanted. That is what she fought for." That evening, as the sun began to set, Diane drove to the cemetery. Maggie's grave was covered in flowers. Visitors had been coming all day, leaving tributes, saying goodbye. Diane knelt beside the headstone. The marble was warm from the afternoon sun. "We did it, Maggie. Every promise, every word." She placed a single white rose among the others. "Richard will spend the rest of his life in prison. The foundation is thriving. Charlotte is becoming the woman you always knew she could be. Benjamin finally sees the truth." The wind rustled through the trees, soft and gentle, like a sigh, I miss you every day. I probably always will. Diane wiped her cheeks. But I am not sad anymore. I am grateful. Grateful that you trusted me. Grateful that I could help. She stood slowly. Her knees were not what they used to be. Rest now, my friend. You have earned it. 1 year later, Diane stood in Maggie's garden. Charlotte had taken over the Thornton estate, transformed it completely. The rooms where Richard had plotted murder were now offices for the foundation. The bedroom where he had held those pills was now a nursery. Charlotte was pregnant, a little girl, due in the fall. We are naming her Margaret. Charlotte patted her belly. After her grandmother. Diane smiled. She would have been so happy. She is happy. I feel her sometimes. Charlotte's eyes were bright. In the garden, in the roses, everywhere. They walked together through the blooming flowers, past the place where Maggie had spent so many hours tending her plants, past the bench where she had sat and dreamed of a different life. A butterfly landed on a white rose, stayed for a moment, then lifted off toward the sky. Diane watched it go, feeling something shift inside her, something releasing. Come inside. Charlotte took her arm. Everyone is waiting. In the kitchen, Benjamin was setting the table. Eleanor sat in her favorite chair by the window, telling stories to anyone who would listen. Neighbors and friends and foundation workers filled the room with laughter and warmth. On the counter sat a framed photograph, 2 young women on a rocky Maine beach, laughing at the camera, their whole lives ahead of them. Diane touched the frame gently as she passed. Some friendships do not end with death. She whispered the words to herself, to Maggie, to the universe. Some friendships are just beginning. If this story touched your heart, let me know in the comments. Have you ever known someone who hid their true face behind a perfect mask? Share your thoughts below. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. And if you want more stories like this, stories about strength, survival, and women who refuse to be silenced, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. New stories drop every week, each one crafted to remind you of your own power. Like this video, if Margaret's courage inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth always wins. Together, we build a community of survivors, of believers, of people who know that justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening until the end. Now go live your truth. The world is waiting. Closing disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is thoughtfully crafted to inspire, empower, and remind our audience of the strength that lives within them. We believe stories have the power to heal, to teach, and to transform. Thank you for trusting us with your time.